Oh, we don't.
It's showing the roads. Because the people at home complaining that they couldn't hear or see.
I did.
And I run something here. So one down now showing down the road. This view, and then this view.
Okay, so it's. You never respond, and they're not probably that many.
And they didn't email, they didn't check.
No, and you're still on the same, there's still. And then, so Sunday. Hey, Sal.
Oh. Okay.
Maybe.
Absolutely. So through that conversation.
That's wonderful.
How's Adelaide looking? Good.
Oh, it hurt back here. They what? That's good. That's good.
Grandma,
But
what do you have to do downstairs?
do what downstairs?
Have to do it.
Fine, but you still have to be up here at 7:30. And then brush your teeth after that.
Yeah.
It's 7:00, and I believe in starting on time. So, Marty, is it possible to turn that? Thank you very much. Whoever, hi Parker. Hi Parker. So whoever, thank you very much for having your screens on. Thank you all for being here. We're gonna start. This is so high up. You don't want me to break it, do you? Whoever is iPad PJ, if you would give us your name, that'd be wonderful. No, I meant this thing. Thank you. Perfect. So welcome back. I hope you were all able to do the reading, read the article that I sent you. Dan Kramer also sent me an article that I should have shared with you and didn't. I apologize. That was really basically saying this isn't just Jews; it's happening everywhere. And in my experience, I've worked with some Lutheran bishops, and the big questions that we're asking are being asked all over the place, and the questions of membership and retention and what are we doing this for are being asked all over the place. So I want to start off by asking you for questions, comments, thoughts about last time, not about the readings so much, but about whether or not you thought about what we talked about at all over the course of the last week. Welcome. And or things that might have come up for you around the topics that we raised last week. Usually at this moment, if I'm on Zoom, I say to people, I am a shrink and I can outweigh you. So did anybody think about anything? Have you had thoughts since last week? Anything about this, the stuff that we talked about last time, or any kind of questions that came up around the topics I tried to present to you last time that you want to share or understand better? Cameron, now I was trying to get your attention. Is no, okay.
Well, Bruce had his hand.
Bruce, you had your hand up?
I
Marty
did.
told me he was going to pay attention to the screen.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, Bruce.
So, I felt it kind of,
Is he muted or can we just not hear him?
No.
can you not hear me?
Now we can, thank you.
Oh, terrific. Thanks, Marty. So I was a little curious, starting off listening to the podcast, and then our discussion last week, and then reading the book. I feel like there needs to be a deeper look at the why. And I think I emailed you this, Betsy. I know we're looking to somehow preserve the Jewish religion, but shouldn't we be asking ourselves why we are first?
It's a critical question. Why does this matter to any of us? It is both a question about why each individual here is here, but it's also a question of why does any one religion matter to any one person? Why couldn't we just all worship Greek gods and get it over with? And why worship at all? And I think those are really important questions. This doesn't answer your question, Bruce. I've lost him. Where did he go? Okay, thank you. It doesn't answer your question, but there is some sociological, really anthropological data that seems to indicate that peoples, not individuals, who have a worship system are more likely to survive, both as individuals and as groups. Now,
Micah just asked.
Michael, would you want to add to that? Because Judaism has something to offer us. Yes.
I'm speaking,
But the question is, does Judaism have something to offer us that's beyond what any other spiritual space, or thank you, Marty, or caring socially conscious states has to offer us? The data seems to indicate that peoples who worship writ large are more likely to survive. Now, that did not work for the Greeks, but it does seem to have worked for other peoples. Bruce, it's not an answer, but your question is a critically important question, and I think we have to return to that question as we think about why any of this matters. Does it matter because it builds community? Does it matter because it gives us a moral framework? Does it matter because it mattered to the people who are my ancestors? It's not clear. And one of the questions that each one of us, I think, then has to ask ourselves is, why does it matter to me? And therefore, what is it that I'm receiving that I want to continue and pass on? Do you want to respond to that?
Yes,
Or-
and that's great. I wasn't looking for an answer. I was looking for a discussion. So this is
Okay.
exactly what
That discussion is coming, I hope. Okay. Any other thoughts, questions, ideas from last time? Go ahead.
It was very thought-provoking, and you left us with that enticing comment at the end about starting little fires. So that got us thinking a little bit longer term, like, where is Judaism in 50 years from now? And does the word Jew or Judaism need to be as part of that identity for it to survive? Or, like, more practically, would you rather touch 5,000 people with Tikkun Olam, or would you rather have 250 committed Jews praying together?
So people at home, could you hear what Scott said? Some, not all. No. Okay. What Scott raised is kind of, what does it mean for the future, and what are we thinking about when we think about not just today, but the future of Judaism? And would we be better served by having 250 Jews or 5,000 people experiencing some kind of tikkun olam?
Yes. One more add on to that is where's the role of defending against anti-Semitism?
Right. How does Israel fit in, and how does responding to it and protecting ourselves from anti-Semitism? And which also raises the question of, are you a Jew because you choose that, or because they choose that when they look at you? I mean, when you think about Hitler, you didn't get to choose. Go ahead, Jane, and then Tamara. And Rabbi told me I could only spend 10 minutes on this. This is when he was talking.
I'm not exactly sure how to articulate this, but I don't think that you need to choose between the 5,000 people who are doing Tikkun Olam and the 250 dedicated Jews. And I'm not even sure you have to choose between or enter when you do the discussion on why should Judaism survive. It shouldn't in any way be, and that's what's sort of nice about Judaism, is that it's not exclusive in the sense like it's not competitive to other religions. There are some religions that are competitive to other religions in the sense that they posit that they are the only way.
Right.
And so Judaism really has never had that flavor. And so to the extent that it seems that all societies create religions, no matter what anybody wants to do, that religion seems to be inherent in any community, even if it doesn't look like that, if it's gold or it's a framework. That the question, I think, that sometimes or that you're looking for here is, what is the richest Judaic or Judaism that we can present for the future that will give meaning to a certain group. Judaism has never said that it's going to be the major religion. It's frankly too hard. But it seems as if that's really the question, that you assume there will be religion because that's just the history of man. People have tried to stomp out Judaism, that hasn't worked. So how can you make it the best that it can be going forward? I would think that's sort of the question.
So what Jay is raising for them is a question of not choosing between the 250 and the 5,000, but recognizing that human beings seem to pursue religion over the millennia. What is it that Judaism offers to us, and what might it offer to subsequent generations? And how do we begin to understand that in a forward-looking way rather than in a nostalgic way? And I think that is the question we're going to be spending some time on today. So Tamara, and then Grant, and then.
I think I interpreted when Scott said a choice, not in choosing because of a religious dictate, but choosing as you're thinking about the core competency of the synagogue and the restraint on resources ultimately. And so just a kind of strategic prioritization of what is it that the temple wants to stand for and invest its resources and the capital of its, of its congregants in, as we make choices of what are we trying to perpetuate.
So Tamara's narrowing the question from Jews to Temple Sinai. And I think that's an important question, but I think we have to recognize that all of us enter this place. One of the things I've said to rabbis a bazillion times is, when people meet you for the first time, they're not meeting you. They're bringing every rabbi they've ever met before. When you go to the dentist, if your dentist hurt you when you were a child, you know that new dentist is going to hurt you, because we don't enter relationships without old patterns. And so when we think about what is Temple Sinai, it includes all the synagogues that all of us have ever been in or fantasized about, and the one in Fiddler on the Roof. So that when we think about what the future is, it is based in a conception which has boundaries, which the future doesn't necessarily have to have. Thank you. Go, and then, and then.
No pressure, Nick, is it 250 versus 5,000? I don't think so. It's more of interpretation. I mean, Heschel said he prays with his feet.
Right.
So that's worship.
Right. And so what do we mean? What do you mean by worship? And what do you mean by worship? And what do you mean by worship? And is worship even the right noun. Or verb, depending on how you're using it. Okay. So Mike says to me that I have to go back and do the master story thing again. So I want to just, I want to apologize to you. I looked for another phrase that was more PC, and all I could come up with was master sword, which has something to do with some kind of maybe Game of Thrones. I don't know, but I didn't understand it. So I can't come up with anything else. I've come up with foundational story, but it doesn't really work because it's not a foundational story. David, you have a better one? Primary story. But that sounds like it's the first as opposed to the okay. So what happens with a master story is we each have master stories. The master story of the city of Stamford is the city that works. That's the master story. The master story of Temple Sinai is growth happens here. We have master stories. The master story of the United States is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And we know those master stories are not necessarily true, but we marry the master story. We are attached to the master story. And then what happens when the master story fails us, either because I realize it was a lie all along, or because something happens that I really can't absorb, is that I go into what Rabbi Lappe described as not a crisis, a crash. Thank you. And I have those three options: option one, option two, option three. So the master story is required for the crash, and everybody has a master story. We all have master stories. Why do we have master stories? It's really very simple. They're enormously efficient. I can understand the world through the master story, even when it doesn't apply. And so it's a way in which I can organize information in my head. All Jews are cheap. That's a master story about Jews. I can organize so if that is my master story about Jews, then I can organize my relationship with Jews using that master story. Does that make sense? Mike said I did not do a good job with this last time, and Muriel says I'm not doing a good job with it now. Go.
I never thought of having a master story. I mean, you're trying to say that we all basically have where?
It's the kind of efficiencies in your brain about other people and about yourself. So every synagogue I know describes itself as warm and welcoming. That's a master story, right? And we presume the master story to be true. But when people don't experience it that way, they have a kind of a crisis. They could have a crisis. So that crisis might be, I can't be in this synagogue because it's not warm and welcoming. Or it might be, I have to reevaluate my master story. We have multiple master stories. So Fiddler is a master story about the shtetl. It's not true. Right? It's not true, but it's the master story about the shtetl. Does that make sense?
One point is that it's sometimes subconscious, so it's not like, okay, here's my master story. It's almost
always subconscious,
yes,
Terry.
so that's why you may not realize you have, but if you reflect on it, you might.
So, questions about this? I'm going to read you a master story that's in the book. This is John Ossoff. I think that Jews share a story that compels us to approach the world with empathy. Master story. Because our story is one of hardship, persecution, perseverance. Our story is one that has required us to fight for our freedom and survival, which has required us to find those of other faiths who, with kindness and empathy, have harbored us in times of great danger. Most Jews, no matter where they live in the world, share an immigrant story. That's a master story, because if you don't live an immigrant story, the master story is we're all immigrants. Now, everybody in the United States except Native Americans are immigrants, but we want to own this. We are immigrants. That's part of our master story. I just want to make sure you understand this idea. We have been a people on the move. That heritage informs my commitment to a vision of America that is open and decent, kind and respectful. That lives up to our national character as a place that welcomes strivers from afar and those fleeing violence and persecution. There are lots of parts of that master story that are not true. But when you read this, which is on page 8, the rabbis Spratt and Stanton present this as though it is a real master story. And it is a universally understood one. Sorry, Micah. This is a master story, which when we question it, changes our relationship. So that one of the interesting things about a master story is as soon as you know it, it changes. As soon as you can articulate it, it changes. Okay. So what happened, the reason I think this is so important is because I think what happens around these stories is that we develop a nostalgic relationship with the story. We say to ourselves, we romanticize the past, we look backwards and not forwards. We think that the master story is something which we are obliged to continue and which will continue to feed us. So that we look at those stories as facts which exist in the past, present, and future. And that they're not going to change. The problem is that people change and generations change and technology changes. And so there are times when the story doesn't work and we hold tight to the story because the nostalgia of the story feels so good. And I don't know how to change it. So what I want us to think about, for example, the use of space in buildings in spaces of worship. The smallest part of this building is where the most people spend the most time, which is the offices. The largest part of this building is the part of the building that gets the least use. That informs our master story. It informs the way we see what the space here. That tells us that the most important thing we do in this building is worship. The second most important thing we do, Bruce thought I was going to say the bathrooms. The second most important thing we do in this building is learn. And the least important thing we do in this building is run the building. That's a little wacky, isn't it? Why what?
Why is it wacky? That makes sense to me.
Because what we're doing is we're basically saying, in the same way that a budget is a value system, this is a value system. Yeah. And so at some level, are we saying that the relationship of the congregation to worship and God, if God's even relevant to people, is more important than the space in which the primary work takes place? Should Rabbi and Cantor and Maura Erica have more space? Should we go ahead?
I just don't get that. There are 3 people in an office.
Yeah.
And you're
Well, there's 6 people. There's 6 people,
okay, 6, but
and they're crammed in.
okay.
The only reason I'm raising it is because it is a way in which the story is told.
Yeah.
The story is told through the use of space.
Okay, so I just have a question, but not everybody is sharing this master story, because everybody is coming at that exact example. Some people think, yeah, that makes perfect sense, and other people may think that's totally out of order. So I mean, when we talk about a master story in the context of the temple or your experiences, everybody has a different master story. So how do you bring that together?
It's a great question.
The temple itself.
So everybody enters with a personal master story and then buys a communal master story or not. And what we tend to see when there is a revolution is a rejection of the previous story. That makes sense? We have to change the story. Go.
For that person, but there may be people that are
right. And if they take
happy with
right,
that.
absolutely, there are always people, and that's those 3 options.
Right.
Okay, so Beth,
So years ago, growth happens here wasn't the story, right? So I clearly remember when Jay was so proud to say those words the
Yep.
first time. So the story changes.
the story changes, but what happens
But it's
is,
based on
but it's based on the past, and we have a nostalgic, romanticized relationship with the past. So this is what I want you to do now. I'm going to continue to ask you to work with people that you didn't drive with or don't live with. And I'm going to continue to ask you to take my phone number and email me, like within the next 48 hours, please, your answers to this. But what I'd like you to do now, and you're going to have 10 minutes, and Marty, you'll break them up. Thank you. I'd like you to work in groups of 2 or 3. You have 10 minutes. And what I'd like you to ask yourself is the following question, 2 questions. What was a quintessential Jewish experience for you? Doesn't have to be a worship experience. This is not an easy question. A quintessential Jewish experience, and what made it so? Questions for me about the question. Okay, you have 10 minutes, get up and move. Don't work with people that you. Beth, you have to find a partner.